depth and breadth of knowledge, which is one of the 6 parts of the degree level standards. And this is essentially what it looks like. So it outlines what a bachelor's degree would be on the left, in the middle, a master's degree, and then on the right, a doctoral degree. So these are all cumulative, meaning that as you move from a bachelor's degree on one side right through a doctoral degree, you will acquire all those skills. So let's focus now that we talked a little bit about Canada nationally and how things operate. I'm going to describe how kind of the rubber hits the road and how things really function, which is determined by each province. And I'm going to speak specifically about my home province of Ontario, which is centrally located in Canada, which is the orange shape in the middle of the map here. It's also the most populated province in Canada. We have about 13 million people. And most of the universities that we have 22 public funded universities in Ontario, and those are very close to the border. So you can see in the bottom of the map where it kind of ends. That is where the United States starts. So most of our population is actually very closely located along that border. And most of the universities in Ontario are 1 to 2 hours drive from the United States border. So interesting enough, that's actually not unique to Ontario. Most of Canadians' population is in the very small quarter of the map along the border, where the top 3/4 that you see are more scarcely populated due to climate and geography. So that's a little bit about the landscape of the province. Now let's look at how universities function in Ontario. So on the first side, we have the government. So the government controls what institutions can become universities and if they can grant degrees. And this is built into the law. Post-secondary or tertiary education institutions fall under this Ministry of Colleges and Universities. And this government also provides approximately 40% of the funding that go into universities. So we rely on the government quite a bit for our operating funds, and they're heavily subsidized. The rest of the operating funds we have come from revenues, which would be mostly tuition fees. So the ministry is fairly hands-off with the academic side of the house, and they are more focused on finances, monitoring tuition rates, looking at our enrollment levels, and providing assistance to students who are in need of financial support to attend university. They also provide policy direction, and they work to differentiate academic institutions to differentiate from each other. So instead of having every university offering the same program, they really encourage different universities to have a special focus and promote that focus. And I think that's their way of thinking the best way that they can strategically fund education in the province of Ontario. So on the other side here, I'm going to speak about the Council of Ontario Universities. So when I showed you the big map of Canada and I talked about the 2 pieces that bound us together across the nation, which was Universities Canada and the Canadian degree level, the degree framework, the Council of Ontario Universities is very similar to Universities Canada, but just in the province of Ontario. So they promote cooperation between all bodies. Not every province, by the way, has an intermediary group like the Council of Ontario Universities. When I worked with colleagues in British Columbia and Alberta, which are on the western side of Canada, they don't have a body that's in between the government and the universities. So this is sort of unique to Ontario. But this council manages all things academic. So the left side of my screenshot here, the government carries and is concerned about finances and tuition primarily. And on the right side of the screen, this is the council that really worries about the academic parts and the programming that universities offer in Ontario. So every university needs to belong to the COU. We all pay a fee to belong to them as well. And new programs go through them, as well as a review of our existing programs. So this body, you'll see in a highlight there on yellow on your screen, is the Ontario Universities Council on Quality Assurance. And we call them the Quality Council for short, because that's a mouthful. The Quality Council is under this body of the Council of Ontario Universities, and they're like NACA to us. So they control all the quality assurance information and processes that all our institutions, universities that is, in Ontario have to follow. Okay, I'll go into a little more detail here about the Quality Council. So the Quality Council hasn't been around forever. It was actually only established back in July 2010. And as I mentioned, they're responsible for all quality assurance across Ontario. And their guiding document that we all must follow is called the Quality Assurance Framework. So I kind of call it like the roadmap. It's like our recipe book or our Bible, for lack of a better term, of how we would proceed to do quality assurance in Ontario. So all universities must follow it. The Quality Council is actually arm's length. So even though they are kind of affiliated and they do send their reports to the government, they are not controlled by the government. They are independent from both the universities who send their reports to them and work with them, and then the government's on the other side. So they are meant to be a neutral party. Let me see here. So another thing about the Quality Assurance Council is that the main things that they monitor are three things. So they look at reviewing all the existing programs that a university has. They also review and approve all new academic programs that universities offer. They look at major modifications. A major modification is when you're changing something in your program, for example, a name change or a change in the mode of delivery. They want to know those changes and keep track of those. And they also do an audit process. So an audit process is when your university gets audited on how well you're following this quality assurance framework. So that happens about once every 8 years. And at this point in time, now every university in Ontario has gone through that cycle since this Quality Council was founded. So we've all gone through the process. We've all seen where we could do better. And we are all working on improving what was identified in our audits that we could change and improve upon. It was a great process. It wasn't scary at all. I know a lot of people think an audit can be a little bit intimidating, but it was really more of an eye to how you can improve things. So we found it very valuable and impactful for the way we were functioning at Waterloo. So this is just an image of what actually is in the quality assurance framework. So really, it's a very dense document, but most of the density is in the appendices where they outline the processes and the protocols. So the first part is really talking about the general principles of quality assurance, as well as what is the responsibility of the Quality Council and what is the responsibility of the university. And at the bottom, oops, let me go back here. Oh, too far. At the bottom of these appendices, you can see that they also include the degree level expectations, which are tied into those degree level standards that I showed you at the beginning that all degrees in Canada must comply to. So next, we're going to recap what those broad categories are just in the degree level standards, because they are so important to our process. So every degree in Canada has to cover these 6 broad dimensions. So those are depth and breadth of knowledge, knowledge and methodologies, application of knowledge, communication skills, awareness of limits and knowledge, and professional capacity and autonomy. And on a side note, in the bottom last one, the professional capacity and autonomy, if you've ever heard me speak before, I'll comment that that's where academic integrity is embedded into these degree level standards. So it's a nice blend between quality assurance and academic integrity for academic integrity to be brought out and really highlighted, because it's built into something that our degrees are supposed to cover. and not everyone knows that in Canada. So there's a lot of work to be done to actually leverage that in our system. Okay, and this is just an example of what the degree level expectations basically look like. Again, this is off the Quality Council website. Because they're so dense, I'm only showing the first one here. And as you can see, there's many different concepts and indicators on the right-hand side. They are also broken down by undergraduate and graduate. So this is actually the graduate one as well. So would it be a little bit distinctly different as you proceed, which would make sense because the bachelor's level is at a lower level and they're gaining more knowledge and skills as they go on. One of the ways that you might wonder, well, how do you show that these degree level expectations have been achieved in your curriculum? And this is, again, really imperative and part of the quality assurance process in Ontario, which is why I'm spending some time on it. So I wanted to show you how you demonstrate how you meet one of those 6 dimensions. So this is called an undergrad curriculum map. And it's an example to show you kind of how you track these things. So first off, these are the levels of mastery at the top. So when something is introduced is probably at the beginning of a program as they move through a degree. In the middle, you would think that these skills would be reinforced. And at the end, students should be demonstrating some mastery or competency of the skills that you've been covering. So these are the course codes that would be demonstrated in a program. And then this is the degree level expectation. So for each one of those 6, there would be a block that would cover that category. And then for each course that you have, you would demonstrate or mark off on this map where you're introducing that concept, where you think you'll reinforce that concept, and where students should be expected to complete that. So every cyclical review or academic program review that we do, programs must complete this so they can demonstrate that they are covering these degree level expectations. And again, those are also an Ontario expectation, but built into the Canada or national-wide expectation, which is why it's so important. We also insist that new programs create these as well. So we see these on many levels. Our faculty, or our unit, I should say, doesn't create these ourselves. We have help from educational developers in our teaching and learning centers that work with programs to look at their curriculum and make these maps. So they get a lot of support to do these, but it's quite important as far as being able to show how skills are developed across the degree in our quality assurance program. So a recap, just generally, about why quality assurance is so important and why it's built into most systems around the world. So why do we do this work? So we all know that we can continue to offer an academic program year after year, and students will probably come and take it and graduate. But how do we know that that program is of quality? So the reason why we do quality assurance and review these things is to make sure that we're always providing the most up-to-date and recent teaching and learning and research in our degree programs. And we want to maintain a culture of continuous improvement and have high standards. So we systematically reflect on what we do well, what we don't do well, and where we can improve going forward. By doing the continuous improvement, it shows us what we can do better on an ongoing basis. It's probably something that we could do a little more frequently because reviews don't happen very close together. Typically, reviews happen every 7 to 8 years. So it's always good to be looking at what you can do better in your program. It also makes sure that our standards are on par with our degrees, with degrees that are offered in other provinces across Canada and as well internationally. So back to those Bologna descriptors, making sure that we're hitting all the marks so we're consistently delivering credentials that are going to be consistent with credentials that are offered elsewhere in the world. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the quality assurance council in Ontario. We've talked about the quality assurance framework, which is basically the Bible, for lack of a better term, that each university must follow. So let's talk about how a university actually applies that. So the standards of this quality assurance framework are adopted by a university in their institutional quality assurance process document. So every university has to create what we call an ICAP, and that's based on the contents of the quality assurance framework. And when we write this ICAP, your internal senate of your institution needs to approve it, and then it goes to the quality council and they review it and make sure that it is in alignment with the quality assurance framework. So you might be asking yourself, well, if there's this QAF, why can't every university just follow the QAF? It seems fairly straightforward. The principles and the expectations are there. The process of how you do things is outlined. So why can't we just follow the QAF? And that's a very good question. The reason being is because our institutions are so different. So it's really in the details. I regularly get together with my colleagues from other universities in the local area who also do quality assurance. And sometimes we talk about the different ways that we operate and do things. And one example is looking at major modifications. So I mentioned what a major modification was a little earlier. A major modification is when you're changing a portion of your program, but it's not enough to make it a new program. So you might be changing the name, you might be delivering it online instead of in person or in a hybrid offering, or you might be adding a work component or a co-op stream to that program. Those are all major modifications. So when I talk to my colleagues about how they're involved with major modifications, each one of us says a different story. So one of my colleagues doesn't participate in major modifications, but she gets a list of what major modifications have been made from another unit, and she reports those to the quality assurance office. And one of my other colleagues, on the other hand, actually has a group that vets all the major modifications that come in. So they look quite carefully at each one, and they are very specific with their approvals, and they track them. Then there's the University of Waterloo, which falls somewhere in the middle of that. So we don't particularly vet or evaluate major modifications until they come to committee. And then we track when they're passed. So we're kind of in between the two different versions. So the differences between the way that each one of us complies with the quality assurance framework is really based on the structures and the governance and the different models that we have internal in each of our systems. So even though we are all complying, we each do it in our own unique way. So that's why we have to create an ICAP that guides our process in each of our institutions. So that was a long story. Hopefully you're following along with me with all my acronyms and all these processes. It is very complex, and it takes a long time to learn how all these systems work together. So just to recap, our institutional quality assurance process for the University of Waterloo and other universities guides all the academic program reviews, all the new programs that they are preparing and developing for approval, major modifications, and how we are audited. Okay, so let's look just to, again, highlight how quality assurance works in Ontario. So we've got our council at the top here, which is the body of the Quality Council. Then we have the Quality Assurance Framework, which we all adhere to in the middle. And then each university has their ICAP process on the bottom, which is, as I mentioned, the like the Bible that we need to follow. So you can tell that the Quality Council feeds into our work at a university level, and then the reports that we provide at a university level get fed back up into the Quality Council so they can ensure that we're doing what we should be doing in regards to this process. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the University of Waterloo. bear with me here. I'm working on two screens, which makes it a little challenging. There we go. Okay. So just to give you context about the institution that I work for and where we are, I did show you the map of the province of Ontario. We are about 1 hour outside of Toronto in southern central Ontario. The University of Waterloo is a comprehensive research university, and we have 6 faculties. So we pretty much cover everything, but we're most known for our STEM fields, which would be our engineering and our math and our computer science fields. So we've been very highly ranked in Canada. We are #1 in computer science, engineering, and math. We are #1 for experiential learning amongst comprehensive universities, and we are ranked as the 3rd best overall university in Canada. In the world, we are ranked 175, which isn't too bad. I think the rankings go into the thousands, so we're doing not too poorly in that area. Given with our specialties of computer science, we also are very attractive to large companies that do hiring. So Microsoft and Google actively recruit from our campus, and Bill Gates has been at Waterloo a number of times to hire students and talk to our faculty of computer science. We've also had Stephen Hawking come and visit our campus as well. So the key differentiators for Waterloo, 2 things that really make our university stand apart is our cooperative education program. So students start a term in a co-op program, and then they go out on a work term, and then they come back and have a term of school, and then they go out on a work term. So by the end of a co-op student's degree, they could almost have 2 years of paid experience working in the field, as well as their degree. So this is something that Waterloo started from the beginning. It's very strong and one of the largest cooperative education programs in the world, actually. So picture this: every term, Waterloo finds jobs for 7,000 students every term. So every 3 to 4 months, they are employing students in the field at a very high level and then bringing them back on campus. So you can imagine the complexity and the amount of contacts you need to have to find jobs for 7,000 students every single term. So that really sets Waterloo apart. One of the other things that sets Waterloo apart, and then I'll stop talking about the university, is its velocity program. So it really values entrepreneurship and thinking outside the box. So you might have heard some of the unicorn companies. A unicorn company is one that has a valuation of over $1 billion. And Waterloo has helped nurture a number of these through its velocity program, which is basically a makerspace or a workspace where entrepreneurs can get together and flesh out their ideas, and they receive some funding. So far we've had multi-million dollars, billions of dollars actually generated by these companies that started in this incubator system. So a couple of examples are the shopping app Wish, Kik, which is an instant messaging program, and Instacart. So those might be a few that you might recognize. One of the other most notable products that was associated with the University of Waterloo was Blackberry Phones. So I'm not sure if Blackberry Phones are popular where you are, but one of the founders was a graduate of the University of Waterloo and has helped found and put money into our quantum computing section at the university. So that's enough about Waterloo. I will move on to tell you a little bit more about how the Quality Assurance Office that I manage started, which I know you're interested to hear. So essentially, pre-2015, the Quality Assurance Office at the University of Waterloo didn't exist. So at that time, we had 2 senior administrators, one in graduate studies and one in undergraduate studies, who were supported by their administrative assistants to complete all things in regards to the ICAP that I just mentioned. So they were looking at all academic program reviews, all new programs, major modifications, and having to be prepared for an audit. You can imagine that on top of their busy portfolios that this was a lot to manage. So they identified that they really needed to bring someone else on board. So at that time, I was managing our Office of Academic Integrity, and I was called upon to basically put together the Quality Assurance Office, which was a nice role. As I mentioned earlier, the natural connection between quality assurance and academic integrity and how that's built into our degree level standards in Canada made it an easy join. So I was able to take on the role. I became the manager of quality assurance and also was the manager of the Office of Academic Integrity. And early on, once we started talking about how the office would look, it became readily apparent that functioning with having undergraduate programming and graduate programming separately was not very efficient. So we decided quite early on, you can see that it didn't take long for things to really amalgamate between 2015 and 2016 to become a centralized office. So we decided that both undergrad and grad activities should be together under the same roof. So we officially formed the Office of Quality Assurance. I took on the role of Director of Quality Assurance, but still independently managing the two units below me, so the Quality Assurance Office and the Office of Academic Integrity. And at that time, we were able to hire one full-time staff for the Quality Assurance Office. So we're pretty lean compared to how many things that we do, but we're very effective, I think, at what we do. So that's a little bit about how things developed over time. And as I mentioned, it went quite rapidly. I will say the resources for this office came from the provost and flowed through the undergraduate senior administrator. Even though I directly report to both the undergrad and graduate, most of the quality assurance office in our structure anyway reports to the undergraduate academic vice president. So because quality assurance is a required function in Ontario for all universities, our provost had no choice but to fund this office. So I'm sure that you're experiencing similar things in the Ukraine, that because this work is required, you will have some resources to populate your own offices and develop them because it's going to be mandatory for you to complete those quality assurance tasks. So a little just additional feedback about what offices look like across different universities in Ontario. Some of them are very small. Some of them don't even really have a quality assurance office, to be honest. It might be still a piece of someone's role, which is not optimal because there is a lot to do. And then we have other universities that are quite well stocked with people who would be employed to manage certain parts of the quality assurance process. So you might have someone dedicated to just new programs or just major modifications or the cyclical program reviews. So our office is, again, pretty lean, but we manage. So that's where we're at for now. Okay, so this is just to show you an organizational chart of how basically quality assurance works at Waterloo. So as I mentioned, the provost is basically the CEO of the institution, and he is responsible to the Quality Council for all things quality assurance at a university. Underneath him is basically the two roles that I report to. So this stands for the Associate Vice President Academic, and this really long one is the Associate Vice President Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs. And those are the two people that I report to. So the provost delegates all responsibility for the quality assurance tasks to these two positions. And these two positions basically sign off on all the documents. They make the final decisions if there are questions and directions that need to be made. And they also read and revise all the documents as needed. So below that is my role. So again, I report into those two senior people. I have oversight of the quality assurance office. I'm responsible for the execution of the institutional quality assurance process. I basically read and revise and provide feedback on all the functions. So every cyclical program review, self-study, I read those. Those are hundreds of pages. every new program that's developed, our office is involved with working with the program to complete the document they need to prepare about the program for approval. And I also read any of the final assessment reports and 2-year reports that are prepared. I'm also in charge of any communication that comes in from the Quality Council. So it's kind of funny. The Quality Council email will come in and it will be addressed to the provost and to these 2 senior people, but really it's my position that responds back for the most part in regards to any communication that we get from the Quality Council. So that's another part of my task. And then below me, I have the 2 people, really only one full-time that reports to me, which is the Quality Assurance Coordinator. And they're basically the person that helps operationalize the institutional quality assurance process. So they do a lot of drafting and revisions. They do a lot of connecting with the other units that are preparing their program review or a new program. They track where they are in the schedule because we do have deadlines and timelines in our quality assurance framework that we need to meet. And they do assist with coordinating those external site visits. So it's a requirement that we have external people come in and review our academic programs that are up for cyclical review, as well as new programs. Those also need an external site visit to evaluate the quality. So this role over here is an admin assistant who is the Associate Vice President Academics Administrative Assistant, and she does a very focused role for quality assurance. So even though it's a small component of maybe only a quarter of her position, it's still very helpful because she does a lot of the logistics for arranging site visits. She will contact the reviewers for us. She will also help set up the itinerary along with the quality assurance coordinator about what the site visit, the agendas will look like and who they will meet with. They also arrange for the travel and accommodations and any ground transportation that's needed, and wraps up with providing the external reviewer with the honorarium. So there's a lot of fine details that role does, which I'm quite thankful that they manage it because it allows myself and the quality assurance coordinator to focus on tracking the other parts of the ICAP that we need to keep our eye on. So again, just the role of quality assurance is that we manage the ICAP and we overview or keep track of where we are in the process. And that's in regards to new programs, existing programs, major modifications into the audit. So it's a lot of moving pieces. So I have a little bit more to tell you about our work cycle and our workload to give you an idea of all the things that we're managing at the same time. At any one time, we usually have between 10 and 13 programs that are under review, and they are going to be moving through the system at one rate, and we always have a new cycle of people coming into the system as well. So it typically starts for us in springtime, where we'll have a number of new programs that need their review, which they have to have every 8 years at a maximum. And at Waterloo, we chose to review them every 7 years. We have flexibility. As long as we don't go beyond 8 years, an institution can choose how often or frequently they're going to review the program, as long as it doesn't go beyond 8 years. So at any one time, we have this large group of programs that are developing their self-studies. They start in the spring with an orientation kickoff where we tell them about the process and what they can start doing to prepare for it. Then come the fall, they will get their template, which is their self-study that has about 20 data tables in it. So it's a bit different than the template that I've seen from NACA. Ours is more detailed with as far as data that we require our programs to address. So they get this template and they have the data tables and then they have the questions. And they have about 10 months to prepare a draft to answer these questions, to also survey their students and their alumni, to really examine what their strengths and weaknesses are and where they can improve. So in spring, we expect a draft from them. And then myself and the quality assurance coordinator will read through the draft. We will provide feedback for them. and then they are to make those changes and provide a final version by July. Then after July, we're looking towards the fall, and that's when we would schedule their external site visit. So the whole process for an academic program review takes about 18 to 20 months, and it's quite long. And if programs get behind, all these timelines get deferred, and that happens quite frequently. We also have a 2-year progress report that's required for all programs. So 2 years past their site visit, they're required to provide us an update on how they're doing. So at the end of a program review, I should recap and say that when we have these external reviewers come, they provide recommendations, and the recommendations basically become a work plan for how the program will make improvements over time. So they designate what they'll do, who will do it, and when they will do it. So that work plan becomes pretty important as time goes on. So when it comes to their 2-year progress report, we expect them to let us know how they're doing on that 2-year work plan and show us what progress they have made. So this is just for the review of existing programs. This doesn't include some of the other work that we do, which is new programs. So at any given time, we are working with units to develop 1 to 2 new undergraduate degree programs or 3 to 6 graduate programs. So those are typically in active development. Behind the scenes, though, there are many, many more that have stops and starts. They might have a spurt of interest where they're got their idea and they really want to start to develop it, and we give them feedback, and then we don't hear from them for a long time. And then it comes back to at any point in the future, they might pop back up again in our schedule and say that they want to get going with it. So it's a bit of the Wild West with new programs. Of course, everyone's very excited to develop something new. They want it as soon as they can. It's difficult for them to understand the processes that are in place and the length of time that it takes. So an undergraduate degree takes about 2.5 years to get through our system. And the bulkiest part of that is spent by them being the program, preparing their documentation about what the program's all about. So that seems to take the longest part, but then it does have to go through an external site visit and through our governance and approval process. So programs get a little disappointed when they hear that. So sometimes they fade out of active contact with you, and then the next day they're on the phone with you and they want it done tomorrow. So the workload with that is a bit unpredictable, and it can be a little stressful because this is a portion where, even though we have timelines with the academic program reviews, the Quality Council isn't beating down our back saying, you know, where are these things? But with a new program, when you have people in a unit and a dean that are quite excited and want something to move ahead, those people can be very vocal. So sometimes that's how little fires can start in new academic programs for us. So that's part of our workload as well. The other piece of our workload is the major modifications, which I've mentioned a couple times. So these major modifications are submitted by the faculty to a central governance committee once a month, and they have a rationale about why they're proposing them. And we track these and we submit these, but we don't submit them any more than once a year. So even though the Quality Council wants to know what's going on with major modifications, they're not waiting to approve them, which is a good thing because there's a number of these that happen every month. So we report these once a year on a Excel document that's quite lengthy that goes into the Quality Council. And the Quality Council might come back to us and ask questions about these major modifications. But other than that, we don't have to wait for their approval, which is good, but it's still a lot of tracking. So I have a little bit of a video clip here that I'm going to play, and hopefully it'll work, because this is what it feels like when we do our work in quality assurance. Oh, I hope it will play. Well, I might be out of luck. You know, you have the best laid plans when you practice things and you have notes and then all technology fails. Anyway, I will describe this video. Yana will have the slides and they can share them after the fact, but this is actually, it's a little blurry, but it's sheep herding. So these are all sheep in a herd, and you can't quite see them, but there are herding dogs, only a couple of them around the outside. It's actually quite mesmerizing to watch the dogs work and move this massive amount of sheep in through different gates and things that they need to move them through. And when I saw this video, it really made me think that this is what our process feels like. There are so many pieces to the process, and it's so large that it demonstrates how we are with a small office managing all this information and how tricky it is to keep it going in the same direction. So this is a little video about the day in the life of a quality assurance office. And when you get the slides, maybe you'll have a chance to take a peek at it. So again, the main activities for the quality assurance office, in a little more detail, is I've talked about the ICAP that we follow and that we monitor, new programs, existing programs, and major modifications. But part of that work is also notifying them when their review is coming up, what the deadlines are for reports. We relay and respond to requests of information from the Quality Council. And again, we're watching those timelines. I did mention that the Quality Assurance Office they're not standing over our back saying that, you haven't reviewed this yet, your timeline is being extended, you're going to be late. But when we are audited, they would look at that and we could be penalized, which would account for them saying we need to do a better job at keeping things moving along in the process. We also support and draft the ICAP documents. So I mentioned we read all the self-study documents and the new program proposals and provide feedback. So our office does a lot of reading. And we are also responsible for submitting this documentation to the Quality Council. And we coordinate the site visits. So those are kind of the main three things that we manage in our office. And I did want to take a time to talk about what makes an office successful. Some of the things that I learned when I started doing a quality assurance office was that all the different people that were involved in this process had never been in the same room before. So I thought it was really imperative to get all those stakeholders and people to meet each other and have a face-to-face conversation where they each shared each portion of their job with each other. And so they could see where they fit into the process, for one, but also so they could understand the overall process. Because when you're only seeing it from the portion that you provide or involved in, it's sometimes hard to understand the broader picture of what the process looks like. So that was really successful. So I would recommend that if you're starting to develop a quality assurance office and you're thinking about all the different people that are involved, I would get them together and have them have a talk about how things are functioning, describe their roles. And the best part about it was that I still meet with this group once a year, and we talk about what's working well, but also what we could do better. So they highlight gaps to me that are areas that we could improve. And that really helps build relationships across campus. It helps build support for quality assurance activities. And it maintains good communication and awareness. So I would highly recommend that you consider pulling together your stakeholders and at least introducing them to each other, if not doing that on a regular basis. And one of the other parts of this work that is really important is always looking at ways that you can improve yourself. So we're always thinking of ways that we can make things more efficient. So one example that I can provide from when we first started was our self-study templates. A self-study, again, is that really big document that a program needs to do a self-analysis about their strengths and weaknesses, what programs they offer, and they have to assess the data. So there's about 20 data tables that they need to look at and share any trends, observations, things that they're seeing over time that could be a positive or perhaps a negative. So it's quite a lengthy document. When I first started, programs used to get a set of Excel files, a large number of Excel files separately, and then they'd have a Word document, and it was up to them to merge the two. So you can imagine programs that, number one, see quality assurance and program reviews as a lot of work. That, number two, this was a big waste of their time. It was their least favorite activity was to format the self-study. So one of the first things that we worked on in our office was to improve that template. So over time, we tweaked the questions that were in that template. We tweaked the format of it. So originally the format was the tables were embedded in the document. So you would have some text and a big table, text and a big table, which wasn't very readable for people who were having to go through these reports. So we decided that we would put the reports at the end of the Word document and hyperlink or bookmark to them in the document itself. So now the template is much more readable and it has hyperlinks. So if people want to see the table, they just click on the link, it takes them to the table at the end of the document, and then they can bounce back. So people and readers really enjoyed that piece. And the other part that was the biggest part is that we put all the data in the table for them now, or in the template. So no longer do they get all these Excel files separately and a Word document that they have to format, which, you know, it takes a lot of time. Instead, now they get one cleanly formatted document that has all the questions and the data tables and the hyperlinks all embedded. So we want them to take their time to focus on answering the questions and writing the narrative and analyzing the data rather than doing formatting. So that was a very important piece for our office and improve the process for the people that we work with. And I think that's something that's important for this group to consider as you're working through your quality assurance processes. Where can you make things easier and more streamlined for your users to make it a better process? So again, keeping that eye to the quality assurance or continuous improvement piece where you can do better, builds relationships, builds support for your work that you do in quality assurance, and generally makes everyone much happier. So those are a few recommendations that I would put forward to help you have a successful quality assurance office. And last, just to wrap up to about why quality assurance is important to the university. Well, the University of Waterloo and any university benefits by having a centralized unit that will look at all these activities. So if we didn't have a centralized unit, we wouldn't be able to really readily identify some of the areas that were not working so well. For example, with the template, if I didn't have a centralized unit that could take control of that template and improve upon it and then send it back out, we'd still have programs getting Excel files and Word documents and being frustrated. So it's really important to have a central body that can help look at your processes and look where you can be more efficient and effective in what you're doing. The other part of being important to the university is that you're really providing some institutional memory and record keeping of your reviews of your programs, so your academic quality, your records of decision making. So when we have a final report at the very end of an academic program, we post that on our website, and we're required to by the Quality Assurance Council. But it also allows for the transparency of how we got to our decisions. So if a program was not great, you will see that a program is not great. And you will also see the work plans that I mentioned that would describe what activity is going to be taken, what the recommendation was, who's going to do it, and when they're going to do it. So it's quite tangible, and it allows us to be transparent about the quality of our programs and how we're going to improve them. And it also allows for comparison across different universities and institutions. We can see how each other is doing. And again, that information is publicly accessible. And the one thing that I just want to hit home with is the eye to continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is really the heart and soul of quality assurance work. So this is something that we're always looking at, whether it's what we do as an office, or if it's in certain processes that we have. It might be rewriting parts of our ICAP to make sure that they work better for the people who are doing program reviews. It's a constant thing. It never really stops. It's always something that we're thinking about. And I think that also builds our credibility and makes the process much more palatable and easier for people to work with. So those would be the academic programs and new programs that we're bringing on in our institution. So this work is sometimes not always warmly embraced because it is seen as an extra layer that people have to do. So it's important to make sure that they understand why it's important that we're doing it and the outcomes and values that they'll get from participating in the process. So that was a very long-winded presentation. I hope I didn't lose you anywhere, and I feel badly that my video didn't work because it was kind of cute, but hopefully you'll be able to watch it on your own time. So I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has about all the things that I just mentioned.
Дуже дякуємо, Амандо. Неймовірно цікава презентація, і насправді ще під час реєстрації ми отримали дуже багато питань. Більшість з них насправді вже розкрито було під час вашої презентації. Залишились, звичайно, ще деякі. Плюс я бачу, що в чаті також з'явилася низка запитань. Отже, мабуть, розпочнемо з тих, які були задані ще попередньо під час реєстрації. Буквально деякі. Ще раз наголошую, що частково на них були дані відповіді, проте, можливо, ви захочете ще трохи надати більше деталей. Отже, одне із питань стосується конкретно моменту створення Центру забезпечення якості освіти, і воно стосується наступного. Чи були ментори або люди, які вам допомагали на етапі впровадження центру? Адже це процес досить важкий, і чи потребували ви допомогу, і якщо потребували, то яка вона була?
I will say that I've had great mentors in my university career. So I've been at the University of Waterloo for 10 years now, and I've had worked at other universities previously. And the senior people that I've worked for were all really invested in what I was doing. They were all very supportive of what I was doing, and they didn't micromanage me. So it was great that I was given the value and the autonomy to move ahead with my plans. So when I was tapped to create the quality assurance office, this person, the senior person, the academic vice president, had already spoken to my current boss about my role and knew quite a bit about me. So I think he had great confidence that I was able to do this and take this on. And when I did take it on, again, I had his support in that we talked about things in general. He approved in general the direction that I was going in and put his support behind that. So I guess senior leadership and their support for what you're doing is really important. I think if it's a challenge for you to find that, sometimes being able to sit down and have a conversation about the value of the process and why it's important can help develop that appreciation for quality assurance. So again, I was quite lucky that I had support kind of implicitly from the beginning, and I could move ahead forward. But I think also even part of general awareness on campus to appreciate the work we do in quality assurance is something that we need to always work at. Again, people kind of know about it, and then they only know about it when they're in it because they have to do it. So building some understanding about the value and what benefits it can bring to academic programs. We've had academic programs have great outcomes and make great strides and changes based on this work. So any way you can highlight the benefits that come out to either your senior people or other people that you're trying to bring on board would be very helpful. Oh, you're muted.
Дякую. Ще одне питання, яке частково, знову ж таки, ви торкалися, але чи насправді обов'язковим є створення окремого підрозділу забезпечення якості освіти, чи, можливо, все ж таки достатньо мати декількох людей, які над цим працюватимуть?
I think I'm a bit biased in that regard, that being that I manage a quality assurance office and an office of academic integrity, I can really see the value and the importance of having a centralized unit. Number one, visually, people start to get to know who is responsible for this and where they can go with their questions, which is crucial. That's a very important piece. So if you don't have an office, you want to make sure that the folks or the people that are responsible for those quality assurance jobs are well communicated to the rest of your campus, so they know who to reach out to. I think it's definitely possible to have both models. I think it depends on the structure of your institution and the commitment to quality assurance. You definitely want to have some resources. Again, I kind of wish my video would have worked, but I think you can get from me talking about the workload, just the number of moving pieces. So we've got all the current programs going through the process. Then we have new programs that pop up. And then we have tracking of ongoing things. So to have a strong tracking system and a way to be well coordinated is going to be really imperative. And whether that's an office or a couple people doing it, again, it depends on the structure and what works best for your institution.
Дякую, Амандо. І ще одне питання з попередньо заданих стосується ресурсів. Питання, яке багатьох цікавить, як і де можна залучити додаткові ресурси, в тому числі і людські, і фінансові, і питання експертизи.
That's a really good point. And in our system, as I mentioned, this is a requirement, and it is a requirement for you in Ukraine as well. So I would imagine that that helps leverage your argument with your senior leadership to get those resources. Obviously, if you're going to be effective with what you do, you have to have some support in order to carry out your activities. And because it is mandated, also for you by law, coming up with quality assurance, you're going to need to have these things in place. So I think those are your arguments from a mandatory perspective, but also you could go for the benefit side of things, as I mentioned, that having this process in place will ultimately lead to greater improvements in the continuous improvement process at your institution, which will have a priceless effect on the programs and what you offer as an institution. So I think you can't really put a value on that work, that hopefully your senior leadership will be supportive and support you with resources and whatever you need to make that happen.
Дякую. І перейдемо безпосередньо до питань, заданих вже в чаті. І, як я бачу, деякі з них стосуються розробки освітніх програм. Якщо коротко, то найбільше цікавить, хто здійснює розробку освітніх програм і хто відповідає за їхню якість, вимогам, які діють в університеті. І навздогін цьому також про те, хто, наприклад, скільки приблизно людей задіяні в розробку такої нової освітньої програми.
So new academic programs are primarily managed by myself and the quality assurance coordinator. So really just the two of us. And at any one time, as I mentioned, we'll have a number of new programs at different starts and stops in the process, and a handful of them that we're actively managing. Now, in order to ensure that those new programs are of quality, again, our institutional quality assurance process, that ICAP document or Bible, institutes or lays out all the different things that we have to have in place to put a new program ahead for approval to the Quality Council. So we have a template. Actually, we start off with a statement of interest. At the very beginning phase, in order to weed out what ideas are going to maybe have legs and grow and become reality, this statement of interest outlines all the basic necessities that we need to know. So what program are they going to offer? What level? Is it a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate? Is it going to be a regular offering, or is it going to be a co-op offering, which means, again, that with co-op, students would go one term with academics, the next term they would go out on work term, then they would come back and have schooling. So they would have a different sequence in their academic progression. What tuition they're going to charge. Is this going to be a normal tuition? Is it going to be something special, like a high rate tuition, which our ministry would frown upon unless there was good rationale to charge a higher tuition? Or is it going to take lots of new courses? What is going to be required to develop it? Are you going to have to develop 5 new courses and hire on new staff? Or are you going to leverage existing courses and use the instructors that you have? Are the courses going to be offered online or in person? And how much of it is going to be online and how much will be in person, which is particularly imperative in days of pandemic while we're working remotely. Also, the learning outcomes, like how does it line up with the degree level expectations, that those degree things that I spent a little bit of time on in my presentation, they have to clearly show how they align to that. They also have to clearly align with the vision and mission and strategic plan of the university. So, for example, one of our strategic areas is interdisciplinarity. So getting programs from different areas to work closer together and collaborate. So if we had a new program come forward that had those kind of qualities in it, it would be more apt to be supported by the institution. So this statement of interest also needs to be signed off by the program's dean in their program or their faculty, so the head of the faculty, and then it would come to our office, and my bosses and myself and the quality assurance coordinator would look at the statement of interest and see if, number one, if the form was complete, because it's a template, so we try to get everything listed out of the way, and if it sounds like it's viable and it's something that the university would want to pursue and it's in a direction that we think would be popular, that students are going to enroll in. So that's kind of the first kick at the can, and we make sure that the dean signs off of it. So these aren't just random ideas. In the past, we didn't have this template, and any faculty member would just show up and say, hey, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. We get further down the road and realize that they hadn't talked to anyone else in their faculty. They didn't have anyone on board nor approval from their dean. So this kind of front loads things. So we know from the beginning that everyone's on board. It's quite clear what you're proposing. And then we dive into all the components they need to prepare to put forward a new program. So again, that includes a template. It would be an external site visit by reviewers who are experts in the field, who would give their insight, whether they feel the new program is heading in the right direction, whether they're going to get the students and the target market that they're hoping for, etc. So it's quite detailed and specific. So that helps us weed out the random ideas of new programs that people come up with.
Thank you, Amanda. Дякую дуже, Амандо. І також ви паралельно ще відповіли на декілька питань про критерії виміряння якості освіти і також ті питання, які стосуються освітніх програм, тому я перейду ще до декількох питань стосовно роботи конкретно вашого офісу. І одне із питань стосується того, хто контролює результати роботи вашого офісу і за якими ознаками вимірюється ця результативність, якість роботи офісу?
Right. So the Quality Assurance Office, ultimately the provost or the CEO of the university, is responsible for quality assurance. But in our case, that's delegated to the two people that I report to. So that's the Associate Vice President Academic on the undergrad side of things, and then the Associate Vice President Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs on the graduate side of things. So those are the people that, as far as supervision, I'm accountable to, and the Quality Assurance Coordinator is accountable to. Ultimately, we're accountable to the Quality Council. So when we are audited, they will randomly pick out programs and want to look at those and to review those. So one thing that I didn't mention that's part of our workload in my presentation is that we must keep a record of all our decisions. So the auditors will want to see at what point did you send information to an external reviewer? What did you send the external reviewer? How did you pick the external reviewer? When did the external reviewer say they were going to come? When did they come? Like every email and decision, every step of the way we save. So when we are audited, we provide that information so the Quality Council can see how we got to our decisions. So it's quite clear that we didn't pick, people who we thought were going to give us a positive review. Our external reviewers have to be arm's length. They have to be, unbiased, and they have to be experts in their field. And we need to provide proof of that, which keeps us accountable that we're not just trying to falsify any of our reports or just to get someone to say that we're doing a good job because they like us. So it's very transparent. And again, as I mentioned, internally, we do a lot of review looking at our own continuous improvement. We recently went through a lean process as an office. So I'm not sure how many people know about lean business models, but it's a way of looking at everything you're offering in a process and seeing where things are bottlenecking or taking too much time. And where you can improve upon that. So we haven't done a lot of metrics about our efficiency. I think one of the things is that being an office of two people and all the things that we manage, even though we have great plans of how we would like to do some improvements, it's very challenging to take the time to do them because you're so busy with your day-to-day activities. So we did this lean process. We identified our bottlenecks of where we get hung up in the process. For example, I mentioned the self-studies and how large those are and how time-consuming they are to read. So we do slow down and get bogged down when it comes to reading those. And that was identified in the lean process as something that we could track to see how long it's actually taking us to get through reading these self-studies and providing the feedback to the programs. So we do have a few metrics that we could look to for our own improvement. A lot of it has to do, again, with measuring our timelines of response and how efficient we are. Again, we haven't done a lot of that just because we haven't had the capacity to keep up, being that we are a small office and we have so many things that we are managing. But if I had more capacity and more resources and a little more time, I would like to definitely leverage these metrics that we've identified to be able to evaluate how fast we are or how slow we are doing things so we could improve upon that process and hopefully relieve some of the bottlenecks in our process. Even to make it more efficient too is an important piece.
Дуже дякую, Амандо. І одне із питань, яке виникає у слухачів, стосується, чи займається опитуванням ваш офіс. Поясню, що в українських центрах забезпечення якості освіти це теж одне із завдань, тому відповідно і питання про опитування.
Yes, we do. So we encourage all our programs that are undergoing academic program review to survey their current students as well as their alumni. So we do have some questions that have gone through internal approval that programs can pick and put into a survey platform such as SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics or Alchemer. And our alumni relations folks will help push those out to alumni. It's a very streamlined process when it comes to contacting alumni in our institution. The reason being for that is alumni relations likes to keep the most updated list and to control and monitor how many times alumni are contacted so we don't lose those alumni. So for example, if everyone was contacting the alumni all the time, people might get frustrated and not want to stay in touch with the university. So the alumni relations department takes quite care to make sure that alumni are only contacted, through one source, and they keep an up-to-date list. So for alumni, it's very streamlined. We have an alumni survey that they can use with certain questions to reach out to their alumni. With their current students, we leave that up to them about how they're going to do that. They can use the standard survey. We have national surveys, and the NESI survey that we've heard David Rettinger speak about in a couple of his presentations. Our university participates in that as well. So we get results on aggregate that we can parse down and send to programs that will give them insights into some of those national measures. We also encourage them to do focus groups with some of their students as well, which can be really impactful. And we have a unit on campus which offers to do that for groups, programs, if they don't have capacity to do it themselves. So we definitely encourage to have that feedback built into the self-study. It's imperative to have those voices at the table, being that those are active students who are involved in the current program and people who have graduated, so you can really see how well you're doing at both ends of the spectrum.
Дякую, Амандо. Мені здається, що ми проглянули всі питання в чаті, також в реєстраційній формі. Хочу наостанок, оскільки ми вже майже підійшли до завершення, подякувати вам, Амандо, за неймовірно цікаву лекцію, розповідь і за цей досвід, який ви з нами поділилися. І наскільки видно також з чату і з питань, і загалом з комунікації між учасницями і учасниками, лекція спонукала до подальших роздумів і навіть до пропозицій обміну досвідом між різними центрами забезпечення якості освіти в Україні. Бачу нові ще. Так, і, звичайно ж, подяки вам. Отже, на цьому, я думаю, можна ще підсумувати. Я хотіла би також ще долучитися і сказати, що зі слів Аманди видно, що насправді центр забезпечення якості освіти або Quality Assurance Office, він не працює так ізольовано наодинці сам з собою, і Аманда ж також весь час про це говорить, про те, що існує постійний контакт, взаємодія, те, що ми називаємо як командна робота між всіма учасниками процесу, таким чином забезпечуючи це досягнення стандартів якості освіти, хоча, як ми бачимо, в Канаді і Україні різний до цього підхід. Тому перед тим, як попрощатися, хочу також нагадати про ще одну подію, яка у нас буде в цей четвер, чистий четвер, 29 числа. Запрошую, скористаюсь нагодою, запрошую ще раз всіх учасниць і учасників на круглий стіл з КПІ. Більше інформації ви можете дізнатися також на сайті проекту «Ініціатива Академії доброчесності та якості освіти». Також і є окремо створена подія в групі на Фейсбуці. Отже, дуже дякую вам, Амандо, дуже дякую всім учасницям і учасникам. Гарного вам вечора і, думаю, надихаючих роздумів. На все добре.
Thank
Дякую.
you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Amanda.